The problem is that to engage in sexual union with someone who's not your spouse is a grave sin, and to live in such a state publicly means that one cannot have access to the sacraments because he or she is not living according to the truth of Christ. And there's no way that the Church can give permission for someone to do something which Christ himself does not give us permission to do.
Father Antonio Spadaro, who is a very close collaborator with the Pope, in fact, he's his ghostwriter on a lot of these documents, he has really become the vanguard of taking down the critics of Amoris Laetitia, or anyone who would even question the thinking here or the doctrine that's implied through these pastoral adjustments. Spadaro said, and I quote, and I think he's talking about you, that these questions, the dubia that you presented to the Holy Father, is an attempt to ramp up the tension and create division within the Church. Is that what you're trying to do?
No, in fact, we're trying to address the division which is already very much ramped up, to use his phrase. Everywhere I go, and as many faithful priests and bishops and lay faithful with whom I speak are in a state of very serious confusion on this matter. And priests tell me that one priest is telling the faithful one thing in confession, another priest another thing. Only when these questions, which we have raised according to the traditional manner of resolving questions in the Church, which have to do with very serious matters, only when these questions are adequately answered will the division be dissipated. But as is happening right now, as long as this continues, the division will only grow. And of course, the fruit of division is error. And here we're talking about the salvation of souls, people being led into error in matters which have to do with their eternal salvation. And so Father Spadaro is very much in error in that affirmation.
Spadaro also said that, look, the Pope does not answer binary questions presented to him. And I want to quote this. He says, he answers sincere questions from pastors. Were you offended by that?
Yes, very much so. The popes have always, all along the centuries, I'm a student of the Church's discipline. It is the role of the Pope as the pastor of the universal Church, as the guardian of the unity of the bishops and of the whole body of Christ, to respond to such questions. And to suggest that posing these questions is a sign of insincerity is deeply offensive. I can assure you that for myself, and I know the other cardinals involved, we wouldn't raise the questions unless we had the deepest and most sincere concern for the Church herself and for the individual members of the faithful. And to have a maturation of a teaching which is a rupture from that teaching, which is a breaking away from that teaching. Cardinal Schönbrann's remarks in that regard do not reflect what is called development of doctrine. In other words, through the Church's reflection, she deepens her appreciation of a teaching and helps the faithful to practice that teaching. In this case, it's a question of a complete rupture in the teaching of the Church, a complete going away from what the Church has always taught and practiced, and that you can't call a maturation. A maturation is something organic, where you see that what the Church has been teaching about marriage now is expressed with a greater form. Well, certainly I've never witnessed this in my lifetime. In the history of the Church, there have been situations which have some similarities with the present situation, but I perceive that a mundane spirit, a worldly spirit, has entered into the Church, which would divide her members into various camps, and liberals and conservatives, or the fundamentalists, as some are fond of calling those of us who are striving to defend the constant teaching of the Church.
In our final moments, I have to raise this. I was sort of struck, amazed really, at an interview the Holy Father gave, where he suggested that those who are rigid, and that's the term he uses, sort of locked in their rigidity over doctrine and otherwise, that they suffer from a compulsion or a condition. Your reaction to that, and what are you and your fellow cardinals prepared to do if you don't get a positive reaction from the Holy Father and some answer on this point of clarification?
Well, first of all, our presentation of the 5 questions is done with great serenity and with great respect. They are not the reactions of people who are suffering from emotional disorders. That we're very deeply concerned about the truth of the doctrine of the faith and its integrity is not a sign of illness. What will we do? We have to continue to serve the truth with charity, and so especially those of us who are cardinals, who are the principal advisors of the Holy Father, have a very solemn obligation to defend the Church from these kind of attacks at her very foundation. I mean, we have to remember that we're talking about the teaching about marriage and its fruit, the family, and to attack that teaching is to destabilize the whole Church and society in general.